I grew up in small town America, and as a kid, I would ride my bike around. I'd ride my bike to go to the store, to go hang out with friends, to go to school, or just ride my bike around in my backyard with my siblings. But the day I got my driver's license, that all changed. It was seen as cool and the best way to get around to drive. And suddenly, my bike wasn't touched for years. I think I maybe rode my bike once or twice between the ages of 15 and 22. But it was sometime in 2020 when gas prices were really high and I was really broke. I was driving a pickup truck at the time that got maybe 14 miles a gallon. So one day I went on Facebook Marketplace and bought a bike for about $125. And I'll never forget the first time I went on my first ride. I felt like my whole childhood was coming back to me. For the first time in years, it felt like I discovered something again that was just genuinely fun. It wasn't something that was competitive, it wasn't something that I needed to get good grades on, and it's something that really didn't cost a lot of money. This kind of ignited a trend in me. Over the next few months, I started riding my bike to school every day. I started riding it to work when I was done with college. And then I started riding it just to do little errands. A year later, I moved to Portland, Oregon. And now I use my bike as my main form of transportation. But it's something so much more than transportation. It's something, once again, that's fun. Something that's recreational. I've met some of my best friends here through bicycles. It's something that's social. And about a year ago, I was looking through my YouTube feed, as I do often, and something came up that was called bike touring. Bike touring is where you go on an extended adventure on a bike. Sometimes it could just be a couple days, sometimes it could be a couple weeks, up to a couple months. I've seen people bike across the world, bike across the United States, or some just on a smaller scale, between cities, or just biking across your state. And that kind of inspired me. I wondered, well, what if I could do The tour started in Dubrovnik, Croatia. We'd rent our bikes there and then we'd make our way up into Bosnia and then into Montenegro for around day 3. From there, we'd head to the capital of Podgorica, where we'd make a small detour into the Albanian mountainside. We'd head back to Podgorica, back to the coast of the Adriatic Sea. Near Budva in Montenegro, we'd make our way up through the Bay of Kotor before returning back to Croatia and Dubrovnik. All in all, the tour will be about 10 days, 300 miles or so. I put this into Google Maps. So you can see we have the exact same tour starting in Dubrovnik. And something to keep in mind with bike touring is this plan we made in the beginning, but it was always subject to change. When you go bike touring, something that we've learned is you can't really have a plan. You don't even know where you'll be for the next night. So once again, keep in mind that this is where we originally planned to start. And this is a route that we actually took. Just starting the trip out of the airport on Zagreb. Already getting attacked by mosquitoes, I think. So we had to have our plans changed. We ended up moving up to Zagreb after we had a commitment that put us back in the United States in mid-May, which was part of our original plan. And the original plane tickets to take us to Dubrovnik didn't exist anymore. So the change that we did have to make on the fly was to land instead in Zagreb. So we landed on a Sunday evening in Zagreb, and we originally were planning on just moving out the next day, but we didn't know that May 1st was Labor Day in Europe, so nothing was open, the bike store wasn't open. So we spent the day in Zagreb, and we actually went to a festival, which is part of Labor Day in Croatia, where they give out this bean stew that's free for everyone, and you can see a quick photo of that.
Zoe, my partner, will also be joining me on the trip. So we just spent that first day resting up, getting over jet lag, and getting ready for the journey ahead. That morning, we woke up, enjoyed some breakfast at our hostel, and started to mentally and physically get ready for the long journey ahead. So we hopped on the tram from Zagreb city center and headed to the southeast of the city where the bike shop was located. We rented our bikes from a shop called Fumic Cycles out of Zagreb. It's ran by a man named Vlado Fumic, who was a former Olympian. Him and his wife run the store. Nicest people ever. Can't recommend them enough. The bikes we rented were the Orbea Comfort 10. They were equipped with a back rack. We had 2 panniers on each bike, and we also had a handlebar bag to get us over. We weren't planning on doing any camping, so we just stored water, gear, and clothes. Our first and longest day was over 50 miles. We'd be leaving the capital of Zagreb and heading west, eventually towards Ljubljana. That was about a 2-day journey. So our first night's stay was going to be in a town called Novo Mesto. We picked Novo Mesto because it was one larger city between Zagreb and Ljubljana with accommodation. So after 22 hours of traveling and 1 full day in Zagreb, our bikes were ready, we loaded them up, and we were off to go. It felt really good to finally be out on the bikes. I had never been in Europe before, and being out in the world here felt like everything was brand new. The architecture looked amazing, the infrastructure was all different, my eyes were wide open, and everything felt great. As a heads up, I'm sorry everything was filmed in vertical view. It's going to be like that for about the first day or so. And at some point I do change the landscape view and I get a little bit better at filming. These first couple shots are of us getting out from the bike rental place and getting out of Zagreb. We didn't realize how big the actual city was until we left it. Contrary to what American cities are like, where all the skyscrapers are kind of in the middle, what we notice is European cities are a lot more spread out with where the high-rise buildings are, albeit generally a little bit more dense. But it took us about half hour, maybe a full hour to finally get out of the suburbs of Zagreb and finally out into the countryside. We crossed the Sava River to the west of the city, but before then we stopped off at a grocery store to load up on snacks and goods. As we started our journey, a lot of this trip involved navigation, a lot of navigation and figuring out where we were. So it consisted of a lot of breaks like this, but before that, we were able to get some snacks in. Something that felt like home for the first day. A couple of Snickers. After a quick break, we started continuing more into rural Croatia, where we got our first glimpse on what more suburban and rural our life was in Europe. We started heading our way to I think it's called the Jumeneb Mountains, and towards the border of Slovenia. It wasn't very long before we hit the border with Slovenia. Border crossings really intrigued me in Europe. It really was just a case of pedaling through. You could even take a selfie at the border. And just like that, we were in Slovenia, our second country. And there's a couple themes that we quickly picked up in Slovenia. They loved building churches on hills, they loved castles, and it was overall such a beautiful country. Here's the first castle that we found. We were in awe. Nothing is that old in America. We biked into the town of Brasice, looking for something to eat, and are awed by the beauty of it. It looked like something out of an amusement park. We stumbled upon a bakery where we found this monstrosity. I think it was called like a pizza hot dog pastry or something. Despite how it looked, it tasted better. And it was pretty cheap. It costed something like €3 for both of us. So with our stomachs full, we set off to Novo Mesto, through more picturesque villages and through the countryside. And something I noticed about the countrysides of Catholic countries is they're really beating Protestants out with the churches. Protestant countries, pick it up with your churches. They're not as nice. We hit some elevation and hit some of our first hills of the day. As you can see by Zoe huffing and puffing and struggling up. It would be, unfortunately, a symbol of more to come.
Dying.
Heading into the evening, we realized we weren't making up as much ground as we wanted. We thought we were about 10 miles out, and we were actually 20. So with storm clouds in the distance, we decided it was about time to pick up the pace a little bit. Not as much stopping, and a little bit less fun. We were a little bit discouraged, our legs were getting tired, and it still seemed really far to Novo Mesto. We knew we had to continue, and we were rewarded with it, with an amazing castle just outside of Novo Mesto. The town was abandoned because Slovenia celebrates 2 days of Labor Day, May 1st and 2nd. We came into the town completely exhausted. We stayed in the hostel for the night and completely knocked out, ready for the next day. Day 2 would see us travel between 40 to 50 miles heading west towards the capital of Slovenia, of Ljubljana. We travel along the Kyotka River before heading into the southeast suburbs. But before then, we'd have our first taste of the Balkan pastry burek, a puff pastry filled with cheese and meat. It was cheap, filling, and it wouldn't be the last time that we would have it on this journey. So with our stomachs filled, we went and left Novo Mesto and started heading towards the capital of Ljubljana. Despite being exhausted from the previous day, we woke up feeling surprisingly good. We were ready to take on this next day. There was rain in the forecast, and it wasn't long before we had to suit up in our rain gear. But it's not something that we're not used to. We've biked over through the winter in Portland, where it rains almost every day. We took a quick stop at a cemetery to admire the views and get a quick break from the rain. After that, we were off again, biking through more picturesque villages through the Slovenian countryside. The rain kept coming down, but that didn't dampen our spirit for the time being. Something that we noticed is the roads in Europe are very narrow. A lot of this footage, if you're an American, kind of makes it look like we're actually just on a bike path. But this is what the standard road width is for a country road in Europe. We hit some dirt roads along the way and got our first taste of mud. It wouldn't be the last time we were on this type of road. We stopped for some lunch to eat some pizza at a local bar, then started our ascent out of the Kyotka River Valley. This part of the country really started to feel like the Pacific Northwest. It was green, lush, and rainy. Like biking up this road, I felt like I was biking around Forest Park. It really was indistinguishable at certain parts, and the vibes coming down from the rain were impeccable. We hit the peak of our ascent, and then started descending into the valley that was in Ljubljana. The rain was really starting to come down at this point. We made a stop at a grocery store, about 15 miles out of Ljubljana. At this point, we were completely soaked and debated whether or not we should take the train in from there, but at least we had gummy bears. The flowers in the fields outside Ljubljana were in full bloom, and the mountains in the background reminded Zoe of her hometown of Chiang Mai in Thailand. We arrived at Ljubljana at around 5 p.m. that night. Cold, wet, and looking for somewhere to warm up, only to find out that the first hostel that we booked didn't have available bike parking. We were able to cancel the accommodation and then search around Ljubljana for a place. After a few attempts, we found one near the city center that was able to accommodate us with bikes. Architecturally, Ljubljana was one of the most beautiful cities I've ever seen. We stopped for dinner to enjoy some pasta, salad, and the weird combination of chips and guac. The guacamole was weird. It didn't have jalapenos, tomatoes, or onion in it, but I should have known better, ordering guac from a restaurant in Slovenia. We also met up with my brother's friend, Zala. She's a Slovenian native, and we sat down and talked a little bit about our upcoming journey, and she gave us some great recommendations. We ended the night going back to the hostel around 11 p.m., ready for the next day. Day 3 would see us leave Ljubljana and start heading towards the Mediterranean. Since it was a 2-day journey, we'd start making our way towards a town called Bastonia, which was known for its massive caves nearby. We wanted to check out the city and took the funicular all the way up to the main attraction, a castle. We were met with great views. Zoe made herself the king of the castle, therefore I made myself the queen. After a quick break from cycling in the morning, we returned back to the hostel, loaded up on food, loaded up our bikes, and set off to our next destination. Ljubljana was busy this day. We noticed a lot of tourists, and really got to take in the architectural beauty of the city. Unlike Zagreb, Ljubljana was mostly left untouched during the Yugoslav War in the 90s, therefore it retained a lot of its architecture. Just like that, we were off, back on the road again. Weather for today was looking in the mid-70s, and it would even be sunny in the afternoon. We biked along the main road through rolling hills and fields. We made a lunch stop and had our first taste of European kebab. It was delicious. And quickly after, we started our ascent back into the mountains. There was no bike path or anything here, so we had to bike on the shoulder of the road, with cars whizzing past us. That soon came to an end, and we were back on small country roads, and even stopped at this village. Here's me trying to figure out a different camera angle. And here's us taking a quick stop, enjoying the wildlife of Slovenia. We continued pedaling further into the countryside, where we met with more cattle pastures, more rolling hills, and quieter roads. The spite of the journey really started to remind me of my home state of Montana. It was beautiful. The quiet roads became loud again by the sound of gravel under our bike tires. We hit more elevation, started to feel the heat of the afternoon sun. Gravel roads didn't have as many vehicles, therefore I could get a little bit more creative with my camera angles. At times, it really did just feel like mountain biking, and it was another symbol of more to come for later in the trip. With the climbing for the day finished, we started our descent back on gravel roads and started making our way into the town of Bastonia. We arrived in Bastonia later that afternoon, a town that reminded me once again that Slovenia was part of a socialist republic, and the architecture there really resembles that of communism and brutalism. We ate dinner, and I had the local cuisine of Savapici. We then returned back to the hostel and got some rest for the next day.